So let's take a look at adding Passportjs to create a very simple user management system, right? So we'll revisit our mechanisms for logging in, for registering, so that we can add some more security to our pages. I did provide some starting code that you can take a look at here. You see how you can install the core Passport library using npm install passport, right, --save, and then you can install any number of the many different strategies. Here we're installing the local strategy. The local strategy means that it is going to be your responsibility, right? We are going to be the holders of truth of whether this user exists and if this user has a particular role, right? And there are many other strategies. There's the Facebook strategy, the Google strategy. Those strategies deal with somebody else's is responsible for holding whether this person exists, that has an identity, has a particular role, right? Instead of us holding that truth. So we're going to first look at this local strategy. We are going to have the database that is going to hold the information about these users, right, about their usernames and passwords. We are going to be responsible for telling Passport, yes, this user does exist, right? That is their username, that is their password. Right? When we look at next week, look at Facebook and Twitter and the Google strategies. We're not going to be holding that information, right? We don't know if this Google user exists. Instead, we're going to delegate that role to a third party, right? Who's going to come back to us saying, yes, indeed, this user does exist. Okay. So first, let's look at the local one, and then once we understand that, we can then delegate to other folks. Okay. So I believe you already have Passport installed on your server. It should have been already there in your package.js, in your package JSON, right? If you check, you should see that there's a Passport install there. We have Passport Google using OAuth authentication, and Passport Local is there as well. Okay. Next week we're going to add Facebook and perhaps Twitter, right, so that we can authenticate with them as well. All right. So today we're only going to use these two, Passport and Passport Local, right? Which should be already installed on your machine, right? The other thing that we're going to be introducing today is session management, right? Session management, meaning up to this point we have been writing stateless applications, right? The application that we've been writing up to this point has been stateless, meaning the server doesn't remember anything about us, right? We come every time we do a conversation with the server. The way the server identifies us is by some ID, a user ID that we pass it, right, in every single call, right? As part of the path parameter, and then following that ID, the server basically looks us up in the database, finds us, and then it retrieves all the information that is related to us, right? Widgets and pages and whatnot. Yes? Right? But the server is just kind of like a proxy in between getting some state information from the client, retrieving it from the server, and then sending it back to the client. And the server doesn't really remember anything about us. Yes? And that's a good thing. Okay? Stateless applications are easier to scale, right? If the server had to remember anything about us, imagine if it had to remember about not just me, but thousands of users, right? It would need to have enough memory, right, to remember, things about me and you and a thousand other people, right? If I want to scale this to, tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands, I also need to increase the RAM, the CPU, right, and just scale architecturally. Yes. If instead the server doesn't have to remember anything, right? Its footprint is smaller, right? It has less need for RAM, for CPU, right, to remember things about us. Yes. So as much as possible, we want to stateless. Okay. up until we identify a good reason why we need to remember anything. Okay. For instance, security. Right? That's a good reason to remember things. Okay. So one of the things is that when we log in, right, when we establish an identity, right, it would be nice that we do that once, right, and not every single time. Okay. So that if I go to a page and the server doesn't know anything about us, right, it doesn't remember anything about it, it can challenge us and say, hey, who are you? Right, you're trying to access some unauthorized location. Once we authenticate ourselves, imagine how inconvenient it would be that once I've authenticated myself and I go, now it lets me in. If I try to navigate to another page, then it would challenge me again, right? Hey, that's unauthorized, and I have to log in again. That'd be very, very painful, right? Ideally, we would have the server remember that, hey, I've already authenticated, right? Don't ask me again, right? Let me navigate through all these protected pages with the confidence that you already know who I am, right? And so that every time I navigate from one page to another, I can establish that identity. So the way that the server is going to remember us, is through the use of what we call cookies. Okay, cookies was an earlier attempt, right, of circumventing the problem that HTTP is a stateless protocol, right? HTTP originally, the way it was designed, well, still today, right, is that when a server is receiving requests, it has no information to distinguish between one request and another request, right? It treats all requests equally, right? And this was somewhat problematic when we tried to create applications that somehow had some preferences or that were tailored to a particular person, right? For instance, if I was looking at the weather, it'd be nice if next time it came around, I didn't have to enter the zip code again, right? Remember that my zip code is 01234, right? So that if somebody else is accessing the same website, they don't get the same weather as me, right? Or generic weather, world weather. It would be tailored to their needs, right? Or same thing with shopping cart. Shopping cart would be my shopping cart, but not your shopping cart. So somehow we like to be able to remember these things, yes? So the technique was invented of using cookies. Cookies is a mechanism by which the server says, hey, I have no way to remember anything. Instead, I'm going to delegate that to the client, to the browser. It says, hey, browser, here's a little thing for you to remind me who you are, right? I'm going to give you a little piece of information, a little piece of data, right? And I'm going to make a note of it. I'm going to make a note of it, right, in my database that that's you, right? That ID that I gave you, that's you. So next time you come to me, send me back that cookie so I can look it up in the database and realize that it's still you, right? As long as the browser allows this, right? Allows in participating in this discussion, right? In this dialogue, right? In this back and forth of cookies, backwards and forward, right? The server and the client can establish a conversation, right? A discussion where we exchange data, we know who we are, right? We don't have to reintroduce ourselves every single time. Okay, make sense, right? So to support that, we're going to be using this other library, the Express Session library. Sessions allows us to store information about different folks, right? Depending who's logged in, based on the identity of the user who's logged in. Make sense? Right? If I'm in a session, I can store things in my session, and if in your session, you can store things in your session, right? And our informations are distinguished; they don't collide because we have different identities. Make sense? All right. The other library we're going to need is Cookie Parser, right? Cookie Parser is going to be just like Body Parser, right? Body Parser. Remember when we started using Body Parser, the problem was that the data that was being exchanged between the client and the server was in the body, right? When we submitted a form, right, and we encoded it in JSON, and when we passed it over in a post or a put, right? The data was encoded in the body, right? And out of the box, Express doesn't know how to extract that information from the body, right? It knows how to parse the URL, like parameters and queries and things like that, yes? But it doesn't know how to go a little further and extract data from the body, right? So we needed to install body parser so that it knew how to parse JSON from the body of the HTTP request, yes? So same thing with cookies. Cookies are encoded in the headers, right? In the headers of the HTTP request, yes? And out of the box, Express doesn't know how to parse those headers, right, to extract the cookies from those headers, right? So cookie parser knows how to parse the headers and extract the cookies, right, and make them available to you in a object in the request object, right? Just like there is request.body, request.parameters, request.query. Well, now there will be a request.cookies. There's a request.headers, right? All those things are representing the object of the request object coming from the client. Make sense? All right. So you should have also in your server.js, you should already have some of these libraries already configured. Okay? So let me explain what they are. If you go to server.js, you should already have body parser configured, right? We've been using this for the last couple of weeks. But now we're going to be using a couple more things, right? 3 more libraries we're going to introduce today. One is going to be the Passport library. One is the cookie parser library, and the other one is the Express session library. Okay? So the session library is right here. It's we're going to require it, and we're going to configure it, and we're going to say that the session, the way that we remember things about session is through the use of cookies. Okay, and since the cookies are being sent over from the server back to the client, right, as a header, a cookie header, right, and the client is storing that locally in the browser's cache, right. That cookie is, or if you look at them, if you read them in your browser preferences, right, you'll notice that these are just plain text ASCII characters, yes? And so any information that we put in a cookie will be publicly available to anybody in the browser side, right? They can look at it in the preferences and just plain all ASCII. So oftentimes it's a good idea that if any information, especially if it's compromising information or security information that we're going to store on the client side, that we encrypt that information, right? That we don't store it in the clear on the cookie side. Yes? All right, so to do that, we can configure the session. We can configure the session to use a random piece of text to encrypt, right? To encrypt the cookie, right? And to do that, we give it a random piece of text. It's going to use this as the key to be able to encrypt and cipher and decipher the cookie backwards and forwards, right? To be able to send it in cipher and then be able to retrieve it from the client. Typically, you wouldn't put it here in the clear in your source code, okay? Because this lives in GitHub. Yes, folks can read this. Instead, ideally, you would put it in an environment variable that you can then read it, right, from within server.js, right? So it would be somewhere in your batch file, right, or your profile, bash profile would be exported an environment variable that has that secret. And it could be really anything. It doesn't matter, as long as it's the same one that you use all the time. Okay. Other things here is that we're going to configure the cookie parser, right, so that it can read cookies just like we did for the body parser. And so what this is going to do is that it's going to instantiate the session, right? And the session has to be instantiated before we initialize and instantiate Passport, right? It has to be done in that order, right? First, the session from the Express session, and later the session Passport.session. But Passport.session is going to use the Express session, right? So it needs to it needs to have that already configured and instantiated before you configure the passport session. Now, this should already be in your code. Please verify that you have that in your server.js, okay, in that order, all right? Okay, that you should already have that. Let's see, what else? Okay. So let's build now on the server side. Let's build a little user management piece of code that uses Passport, right, to be able to log in, register, and whatnot. Okay. And some of this code, I'm just gonna go over it. Right. It's fairly extensive, so in some cases I'm just gonna copy it and just show it to you. Let's go in the lectures. And let's create a directory where we can play around with Passport. Okay, so Passport.js. And in here, we're going to create a model and a service. And right now, we're just going to play around with the user models, right, and user services, right, to be able to log in and whatnot. So I can show you how that works. Okay. So let's create a model for the user. So this would be user model server JS. And thanks, we've done this already in several places. So let's do it something very, very simple. We'll grab a hold of Mongoose. And grab also, we'll create the schema. So it'll be user schema. This will be Mongoose schema. And right now we'll just have username, string, and password and string. And maybe just first name. That's it. Okay. And we're going to put this in a collection. And it'll be something like so this would be lectures dot passportjs, and then this would be user. Okay. All right. And here I'm going to create the model right here. I'm not going to split it up into a schema and a model, but typically these would be split into two different things. So let's create the user model. And in here we'll have a Mongoose model, and this will be lectures, Passport.js, user model. Okay, and using the user schema. Okay, and things that we'd like to be able to do is create, right? So maybe we'll do some var, a function. We'll do function create user, and this will be the user object, and this will be something like let's see, we'll do user model dot create, and then user, and oh, I see some of you are using Q as the promise. So let's do that. Let's do that. So we'll do a mongoose dot promise is equal to require. Let's grab Q and use the promise in Q. Promise. Right, so that we can, instead of having to sandwich everything inside of a deferred, we can then just return this and use the normal then. So let's create. Let's also be able to find the user by ID and username and password. So we'll do function find a user by credentials, and credentials will be username and password, right? And this will be return user model dot find, and this will be username is equal to username, and password is equal to password. All right, let's start with that. Let's see. Now let's create the service that does this, right? So the service will be user.service.server.js. Okay, and in here. Oh, wait a minute. We need what else do we need here? What else do we need here? The model, the service. Okay, so in the service, we're going to have to create a whole bunch of requests to be able to log in and whatnot. So let's try login first. Okay, logging in. All right. So first, we'll need to grab a hold of passport. So let's grab. Oh, we did that already. So we did these three already, right? We did that. Okay, in the service, we're going to grab passport. Okay, and we're also going to grab the login. Okay, notice what's going on here, right? We're saying instead of a what do we use for login? I think we did we use a get or a post? I forget what did we do. Did we do basically we did a find user by username and password, right? We passed them as path parameters, right, to the service. Instead, what we're going to do is that instead of passing it as path parameters in the clear, right, what we'd like to be able to do instead is that we're going to pass it in the body, right, of the request, right, the username and password. This is going to allow us to encrypt, right, the body so that it doesn't necessarily go in clear text, right? The URL we couldn't encrypt, right? So we were passing the username and password right in the clear in the request, okay? In the URL going back to the server. So anybody who's listening for that communication could see exactly your username and password. Instead, if you pass it in the post, okay, it would still be in the clear, right? But it won't be in the URL. It won't be in the URL. You would have to go a little bit further. We would need to use, instead of HTTP, you would need to use HTTPS. Okay, HTTPS will encrypt the communication that goes in the body, right? So even if somebody would be able to intercept your body, right, it would just be gibberish to them, right? So it would establish a secure communication between the client and the server. But at a minimum, it needs to be a post, right? It cannot be a get, right? If you're using, if you're deploying an OpenShift, the free version of OpenShift does not support HTTPS. Okay, you need to go into a paid plan to support HTTPS. Heroku, Heroku does support. No, I think you have to pay that too.
You need a cert.
Yeah, you need to create a certificate and you need to pay for it. Yeah, you need to pay Heroku.
That's not cheap.
No, you can generate your own certificates. Heroku has a way to generate your own. It signs it themselves. You can use those certificates.
Like if we push it to, like I have to look into it.
No, you can generate.
I'm deploying on Azure, for example. I don't think you could just throw up your own certificate and say, "Here you go, have fun with it."
Well, you can select them, right, and then copy and paste it in the server, right, to use that certificate.
They have like a whole cert store. I have to.
Yeah, you can generate it locally, right, and that certificate then you can register with the server that you want to use, right, so you can exchange the keys. Yeah, in Heroku, yeah, you can in Heroku, but it needs to be the paid version of Heroku. Anyway, yeah, so if you do want to use HTTPS, you do need to have the paid version of whatever infrastructure you're using. All right, so let's continue. So notice what's happening here is that yes, I am going to receive a login request from the client, not a get. It will be a post, right? Mapped to this URL API login, and this is going to be the function that's going to handle that. Yes. But wait a minute, in front of this, we have something else right before our login function. You see that? Right? What we're doing here is that we are asking someone else to interject before us, right? Somebody to take a look at this request before we get it, okay? Meaning before we get it, we want Passport to look at this request before we get it, right? Using a particular strategy, right? In our case, this is the local strategy, right? The local strategy is to query the database, look at a username and password that is coming in the post, right? Look it up in the database. If it's there, notify and say, yes, this user does exist. That's what the local strategy does, right? And then if it is successful, meaning that user does exist, then our login page, our login function will be invoked with the logged in user, right? And then we can notify the user, hey, we can go back to the client saying, yes, the user has successfully logged in, okay? If instead the local strategy can't find the user in the database, we won't even get notified, right? Immediately Passport is going to respond to the client saying 403, this user is, I don't know who this person is, they're not allowed in here. They're unauthorized immediately, okay? So it's handling that part of the communication. Make sense? All right. All right, so what we need to do is configure and say, how is it that we're going to do this Passport authenticate local, right? So to do that, we're going to load the strategy. We're going to load the local strategy. Load the local strategy, okay? And we're going to configure it. We're going to configure. We're going to configure Passport saying, hey, Passport, I want you to use the local strategy, okay? So we loaded Passport. We loaded the local strategy, which is part of one of the libraries, one of the Passport libraries. This Passport has tons of these libraries, right? One for each strategy. One for Google, one for Facebook, one for Twitter, one for LinkedIn, one for you name it. They have a strategy, okay? We're going to use today just the local one, right? Which I think is one of the more complex ones. But then next week we'll look at some of the other ones, Google and Facebook and whatnot. And so we're telling Passport, hey, use this local strategy, and the way it's going to be configured is in this function over here. All right, so we need to configure. There's a function right here. I'm going to grab it, right? And the configuration is right here. This local strategy function is the function that allows us to interact with the Passport infrastructure, right? This is how we're going to tell Passport, yes, this is a valid username and password, right? We're going to use our database, right? We're going to use our database to look up this user, right? So here we go. We have a username and password. We're going to be using our model. There it is, user model. We're going to be looking for the user. This local strategy. Notice that it's being used right here, right? When we're trying to log in, it's going to intercept that request. It's going to expect that in that post there better be a username and a password. That's where it's going to retrieve the username and password, right? They have to have that name, right? And once it parses it out from that username and password, it'll pass it to you here in the local strategy as these two parameters, and then we're going to be using it locally to using our model to see if this user name and password are actually valid. Okay, and then we'll return a user object if the user actually exists or not. Right? If the user does not exist, we're going to use this callback function that Passport gives us, right, to notify the rest of the framework saying, yes, this user exists, or no, this user does not exist, right? If we pass in a false, we are voting saying that this user is not a valid user. Or if a user does exist, we're going to tell the Passport to add this user to the current session, right? Remember this user as the currently logged in user, okay? All right? Okay, so we need the user model. We need to load that. So we're going to require that var user model is going to be require. Let's see, go up one, down to model, and user model. There it is. Okay, we have the model. Very good. What else do we need here? We need also the we need this one right here, app. Right? We need app over here. So we can either have it as a function that's going to be passed to us, or I rewrote it so that I can load it from Express right here. Express, I can load it independently. So let's see, we can say var app equal require, and we can go up one. Let's see, up another one, and down. No, up one again. There it is, Express. And that's going to return us an instance of the Express library that we can use to register posts. Okay? I like to be able to use this all by itself. Okay, what else? Let's see. All right, will this work? All right, we need a post. We need to be able to post this. And we actually need a user stored in this user model. Right, so let's actually create a user here so that we can actually communicate with this. So here, for now, let me connect to the database. So we'll do a var connection string. Let's copy that from the test over here. There it is. Okay, and we'll create our own database for this. We'll call it the Passportjs example, right? And then connect to this, right? So require, and we're going to connect. So mongoose connect to that connection string. Okay, I think I got it right, right? Connection string, connect, connection string. Okay, very good. Okay, so let's create a user. Let's create a user by calling create user. So create user, and we'll create admin. And this will need to have the following schema: username, admin, and password, admin, and user, and then first name, admin. Okay, let's run this from the command line. Let's create a couple of users. Let's create that user, and let's create. Let's see. Let's create Alice, and let's create also Bob, and Bob. Okay. And let's run this from the command line. So we get a terminal, and let's see, where are we? Let's go back up. ls. Let's go into lectures. Wednesday, passport. Let's go into models. Let's run this. So node user model server. Okay. Let's see if it created in the database. Show DBs, use Passportjs, show collections, and we have, hopefully we have a couple of users here. Find, and then pretty. Okay, so we have these three users, Alice, Bob, and admin. Very good. Now let's try and bring that service to us so we can try and log in. Right? So let's try and log in. All right. So let's create a little controller over here. Let's see. In the public, we'll say in lectures Wednesday, we'll create here Passportjs, and create here an index page real quick. Index where we're going to have a login page. So we have here script, source, go up a couple of times, JS. Do we have JS here? Angular, very good. And also let's have link, href, CSS, bootstrap, style sheet. And let's have here ng app, passport app, very good. And here have here a div, class container fluid, and this will be an ng controller. For now, we'll have just the login controller, right? So we'll have the login controller as model. Okay, and we'll have here h1 login and an input field whose model will be user dot username, right? And this will be a form control, and we'll copy this so that we have a password, and then we'll have a button here maybe that allows us to log in. Okay, all right, log in, and here we'll have if we click on it, we're going to notify the client, the controller, saying log in, and we're going to pass the user that we're trying to log in. Yes? Okay. All right, so let's have the controller that goes along with this. So this will be the login controller. ng click, thank you. Thank you. The login controller here, it'll be something like, we'll have Angular with a module. The module name will be passport app, and the controller will be, what is it? Login controller, right? Login controller that is right here, implemented in a function of the same name. And in this case, let's instead of going to the service, let's do it right here. Okay. We're going to do a post, right? But this typically would be in a service, right? So you would do something like HTTP post, right? Well, only if we do the login, obviously. We'll say model var model equal this, right? And then say model dot login. It'll be a function here that we're going to do a post in here, right? We do a post, and the post is going to be what? It's that API login, right? We're going to post it in there, and we're going to pass the user over here, right? So we're going to pass the user right here, and this is going to return, hopefully, a response, right, from the that comes from the client, from the server, and we're going to do a console log response. Okay? All right. I think we need to declare the actual application. There it is. And let's load the login controller from here. Right here. So it'll be script source login controller. Right. I'm doing a couple of shortcuts here, but we'll hash this out a little further down the line. Let's see, on the server, we're going to have to load that service right here, right? So we're going to need to do that. Let's require that from here. We're going to say require, go back up to lectures, passport, lectures Wednesday, right? Passportjs, and then what else we have here? Services, and we have user services. There it is. All right. Let's see if this actually works. Let's run this. Let's see if this blows up. Okay, blew up. Let's see what's saying. User service server. What's it saying? What's it complaining? Trying to open unclosed connection. Oh, did I try to open it? Oh, right. I opened it because we created a couple of users there, right? So let's not do that. Let's not open the connection because it's already open in the larger application, right? So let's not do that. Let's try it again. Movies app login function. Okay, so we never did create the login function, right? Which I do give you, I believe, somewhere here. Login. So here's the login function. Notice how simple our login function is. Our login function is the function that receives is going to be called only if we successfully log in. Right? By the time we get here, Passport says yes. This person does exist. The database has been consulted. The database says that user does exist, right? And by the time you get here, the user does already exist. And so the only thing that we're doing is returning the currently logged in user. If indeed if we indeed call done here with the currently logged in user, this user is added to the session and is also added to the request object, right? So that anywhere you get a hold of the request object, you are always going to have a new object now, part of the request, called the user object, which is always going to be the currently logged in user, right? As far as Passport is concerned, right? The currently logged in user is right there, and we're just going to send them back to the client. Okay, so let's try this again. Okay, so it didn't blow up. Let's try to load this now. Localhost. So this is let's see, lectures, Wednesday, Passport.js. Is that enough? Login. Very good. Oh, that's an ugly button. So let's look at the inspect this, right, so that we can see the traffic, the network traffic, and on the right-hand side, and we just say something bogus. Okay, so notice that it's saying, ooh, a 500 error. That's not what I was expecting. Find user by credentials. Did I misspell this maybe? Did I misspell this in the user model? Let's see, in the user model, do I have find by credentials? I do. Find user by credentials. Find user by credentials. Oh, okay, yes, right. What we're going to add all these functions to a actual model, right? We're going to say user model dot create user. We're going to map it to create user here, and we're going to add it to the. We're going to add also find user by credential, right? And we're going to return. We're going to expose this. We're going to say module exports user model. So that now from outside, when we require it from the service, this user model is going to have that function. Okay, right? So let's try it again. So let's try this again. So let's refresh. We have a 400 login bat request. Let's see. Let's get in here and do a console. A log. Let's see if we get the username and the password. Let's make sure that we are getting in there. Do we have that? Let's see. User failed to serialize user into session. Oh yes, we need a couple more things. We need a couple more things. We need a couple more functions here. So to be able to store the cookie backwards and forwards from the server, from the client, right? We need to tell Passport how to convert the binary that is coming from the cookie, right? How to convert it back into an object, right? And backwards and forwards, right? As this cookie travels backwards and forwards between the client and Passport.js. So to do that, we're going to configure Passport and tell it that we want to use the following methods to serialize backwards and forwards from the session. So from here, now that we have Passport, we're going to tell it that to use the following serialization and deserialization functions. So what these two functions do is going to take the cookie that's coming backwards and forwards between the client and the server, and it's going to extract the information from the cookie and says, okay, well, I have this JSON object that is coming from from the clients in the cookie, is this a valid user, right? I need to reinstantiate this and revalidate whether this user is a valid user, right? So to reconstruct the user from the database, right? We're going to extract the ID in the object that we had sent in the cookie. We're going to extract it back from the cookie, extract the ID, and see if that is actually a valid user in the database. See if that user actually exists in the database, and if so, we're going to put back the user back in the session, right? So that the rest of the framework knows that this is a valid user. And the way we go back and say and decide what is it that we want to put in the cookie. What is that we want to put in the cookie? We do it in the serialize, right? We say this is the object, the amount of information that we want to put inside of the cookie, right? So these two convert backwards and forwards from the cookie to the server, or from the server back to the cookie. Okay, so let's do that again. Let's run. Oh, I don't think we have find user by ID. Let's go in the model and implement that. Let's implement a function find user by ID. Here's user ID, and that's going to be return user model find by ID user ID, right? And let's add find user by ID to the model right here. User model dot find user by ID find user by ID. Let's run this again. Let's see. Try this again. Login. Where's my login? There it is. Login again. All right, came back with nothing. So it came back saying that wait, did it display this? Did it display over here in the terminal? That user, and let's see in the service layer. Let's see that it came back here with a console log user and or the error here. Error. So if we restart this, let's see what it extracts. So if we do a login, did it go in here? Oh, I'm sorry, this is not it. Sorry, this is not where I want to put it. In the use, okay, find user by credentials right here. Find user here. So that should be null, right? Because it doesn't find the user. It doesn't find the user. And but if we try an existing user like Alice, let's try that. Let's use Alice and Alice. Log in. Ooh, we don't want all of them. Uh-oh. Wait, what do we do? I got everybody. What? How come I got so many? Did I insert that many? I didn't. Interesting. Why did I get so many Alice's? Alice, Alice, Alice. I feel that I went down.
The IDs aren't the same.
Oh, the IDs are not the same. Wait, but then which one am I finding here? Show collections.